This is Listen Up Home Buyers, the only podcast offering advice and tips from true buyer agents. My name is Victoria Ray Henderson. I am so happy to have with me today my good friend and associate in NABA, Andy DeFelice. Andy DeFelice is a former president of the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents, and she is the owner and broker of Exclusive Buyers Realty in Savannah, Georgia. Okay, Andy, I'll let you talk now. Hi, thanks for joining me.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me this morning.
I'm so glad you're here. Andy and I are going to talk about one of our favorite topics, and that would be dual agency. Andy, you want to give a definition of what dual agency is?
Dual agency, in a nutshell, is when the agent, and we're talking about a home buying transaction, of course, when the agent is representing both parties in the home buying experience. For example, if you're a buyer and you call the agent whose name is on the sign in the front yard of the house that you want to see, that's the seller's agent. Can they represent you? They say they can. They're legally allowed to in all but 8 states. But the problem that you
Mhm.
run into there when you're dealing with a dual agency situation, and they have to inform you that that's what you're doing, and you have to give them permission to represent you in that way, is you've got somebody that's representing both sides of the transaction. And so our issue with it, and a lot of people's issues with it, is how do you fairly represent both parties when they're on opposing sides, for lack of a better way to say it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's 100% right.
Yeah.
It's probably the main reason that I sought out exclusive buyer agency and representation because
Yep.
so just to be clear, the agent can't fully advocate for either party, so they're not supposed to advise you as a buyer
No.
on, for example, a below asking price offer. They're not supposed to advise you on any terms of the transaction.
Mm-mm.
I don't know that a lot of agents actually understand that they're not supposed to do that because I've overheard conversations of agents talking about how they make this work, quote unquote. But yeah, so at the bottom line, you're dealing with a situation where you're not fully represented as the buyer.
Exactly.
Um, and then talk a little bit about what designated agency is.
Well, it's basically the same thing. Typically, what happens with the designated agency situation is an agent in the brokerage that represents the seller. And remember, in real estate, all clients belong to the broker. So you have the broker, and then you have agents under that broker. All the
Mhm.
clients belong to the broker. The agent is representing and working with that client, but at the end of the day, the broker has the fiduciary responsibility to the client. So in designated agency, the way that I understand it is the broker assigns an agent to that client. So it's the
Mhm.
same thing. You still have the umbrella of the broker that's responsible for
Mhm.
all things that happen to the clients. And you have buyer clients and you have seller clients. And when those two come together on the same piece of property, it's when you run into a problem, or you can
That's
run
right.
into a problem. So it's like,
Mhm.
think about it when you're buying a house. And if you bought a house in the past and you're riding around in the car with your agent, and you're in a dual agency situation. So let's say you're working with an agent that's representing a seller and you're looking at her house or their house.
Right.
You're going to
Right.
have conversations with that agent. You can't not about your qualifications to purchase the house, what you're pre qualified to spend. Are there circumstances that you might make that agent aware of, like, I've got a job offer, I've got to be in this house within the next 30 days? All of
Right.
that information, because they're actually representing the seller as well, and you've given them permission to be a dual agent, they can share all that information with the seller, which
Yeah.
can decrease your negotiation.
It
So,
makes 100% sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
the way that exclusive buyer agents work, we're more interested in getting you the best, fairest deal than we are closing the deal. So
Right.
you just have to think about it in those terms. To me, you're protecting your interest by sharing information with someone that you can trust, which
Right.
I don't know how you can do in a dual agency situation.
So for those of you, I'll just recap that real quick because I know representation is probably the most misunderstood part of real estate.
Absolutely.
And the Consumer Federation of America did a study and they asked a lot of buyers and that was the understanding from the study. In a dual agency situation, one single agent can represent a buyer and a seller in a transaction.
Mhm.
In designated agency, you've got 3 people involved. The broker who
Mhm.
actually has 2 clients, and that would be the buyer client and the seller, and they will assign an agent to a buyer typically so that they will have an agent, on
Right.
representing. And I've frequently seen teams that involve a husband and wife, but you'll have a buyer be with one team member and a seller be with another team member.
Mhm.
And this is a group of people who work together on transactions.
Absolutely.
So, if you're in a part of the country that doesn't have exclusive buyer agency, I would suggest, and Andy, jump in and add what you think. I
Okay.
would suggest trying to find an agent who is either a small brokerage where and you're not seeing their actual listings
Mhm.
for sale, or ask an agent, are we going to see listings that belong to you today or your brokerage? What else would you add?
I think that's very wise. Well, and I get this question because a lot of people that come to me don't realize that I am an exclusive buyer agent, although it's everywhere on all of my. But
Well,
they still don't,
yeah,
maybe they don't get it. They don't
of
understand what it
course.
is. I was interviewed by a physician client last week who was shopping realtors, and she found me online. And that was one of the questions she asked is, how many listings do you have? And I said, I'm so glad that you asked that question because it means that you're somewhat educated. You know that we need to be having this conversation. So
Right.
yeah, and you're right. These team aspects in ours in Savannah, we have numerous brokerages that have teams and they literally have buyer representatives on their team. That's all they do. They call them buyer specialists.
Mhm.
Don't think for 1 minute when they have their team meeting every week, stories aren't being swapped with, I have a buyer that's willing to spend this much money on this house in this
Right.
neighborhood. Listing agents over here, what have you got that we might could work together? And the other, and again, I'm not disregarding or criticizing that business model for those particular agents. I think they're as honest as they can be. As a consumer, you have to really understand the position that you're putting yourself in when you are working with one of those agents. We protect our clients because they're our sole interest. That's all we've got is our buyer clients.
Mhm.
So our
Right.
primary focus is protecting them from the start to the finish.
Right.
If you're dealing with a listing agent or you're finding yourself in a dual agency situation, that agent's responsibility is to protect both clients, the seller and the buyer client. And I don't know how you do that. That's why,
Yeah. No,
like
it's
you
true.
said, Vic, that's why we do what we do because we never have that conflict of interest. We
Yeah,
never have that divided loyalty. No one ever questions who we're advocating for, right? Because it's always the same answer.
that's
It's
true.
always the buyer. Hmm.
I work in the greater DC area, a lot of good professionals out there, and they do a great job. Real estate has a kind of a leaning toward listings, just in general. How many listings can I get this year? And buyers frequently treat it as if you're bringing in wood to a fire, I got this
Exactly.
fire, it's my listing, and I need some wood to get that fire
Yep.
going, right? There is a advertisement that is being used in the area that I live in. The ad says that we can get your house sold at above the asking price, this percentage of the amount of time. And we have a bank of buyers who are just standing by to buy our listings. And I'm thinking, okay, so you have a bunch of buyers who are just
Hmm.
kind of waiting to buy the listing that you're representing. Who's
Yep.
representing those
Right.
buyers?
Exactly.
And how are you helping those buyers if you're telling the listing side, the seller side, we're going to get you a higher price than what you're asking for.
That's awful. I mean, that's to me, that's terrible. I picture this corral of buyers behind a gate. All of a sudden, let's open it up and let them all run to the listing. And then, are you going to
Yeah,
pit these buyers against each other? So then you get into a bidding war.
yeah,
I mean, this is
good
that. Yeah,
point.
that's terrible. That's an awful thing.
Yeah,
I always, when I do buyer consultations or I have clients that come to interview me to see if they want to work with our company, there's a list of questions I give them, whether they're working with me or they want to interview other agents, which I encourage them to do. We are the only exclusive buyer agency in Savannah. So we are the only brokerage that can say, we will never represent a seller. You will never have us come to you and ask you to sign permission for dual agency. We just don't do it. Other
right.
brokerages are going to because they have to. Because in the event
Mhm.
you want to look at a listing that is listed by their broker, because remember,
Right.
clients belong to the broker, you have to allow them to do dual agency. So ask
Right.
that question. How many
Yeah.
transactions have you represented both sides of the party? How many transactions have you been a dual agent in? It's important to know because there are those realtors, and unfortunately, I think there are some, hopefully the minority, not the majority, that don't really understand their responsibility as a dual agent
Mhm.
because that's where
Mhm.
you've really got to be very careful as the agent, like you said, not to give advice to this party that you're not giving to the. I mean, I would never do it. Would blow my mind to try and navigate that kind of
Balance. Yeah.
relationship. It's just not
Yeah.
something that's wise. So, as a consumer, that would be the first question I would ask a realtor that I was considering interviewing. And keep in mind, and I encourage my clients all the time to go visit open houses. We've already signed a
Mhm.
buyer brokerage agreement, so they're committed to me. And the agents sitting the open houses are, at least in Georgia, required to ask that question of any
Mm.
consumer that comes through an open house. Are you represented and have you signed an agreement?
Mhm.
Realize
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, that agent that's sitting that open house, if they are not the listing agent, they are working with the listing agent. So again, that agent sitting that open house is representing the seller, and they're primarily sitting that open house to pick up buyers. They want to find
Yeah.
unrepresented buyers. Can't fault them for it. It's a good way to spend a Sunday afternoon. It's a good way to possibly build your database for later on down the road. But remember who it is that you're talking to. So keep your comments
Right.
to a minimum. It's just unwise
Mhm.
not to.
The first week of March was National Consumer Protection Week,
Hmm.
and NABA put out a great press release. If you haven't seen it, go to NABA.org to read that press release on an issue that I really want to hear what you have to say about. And that is,
Okay.
and it comes up a lot in the spring, but pretty much all year round, the pocket listing, the off
Mm.
market listing. The one that is used as a marketing tool for a lot of, a couple of listing brokerages do it a lot, where they say, "Hey, we've got a property just for you, Mr. Buyer. We have a whole bank of them, and they're not even gonna be put out to the general public. It's just
Yep.
gonna be for people that" what? They handpick? I mean, that's why, by the way, we made this,
Hmm.
press release because it could be a fair housing violation.
Could
But, Andy,
definitely.
you talk about that for a little bit. I wanna hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, even though I'm not a seller-centric brokerage, is how does that benefit a seller? If you're not exposing the property to the masses, where's the benefit to the seller to start with? So if as a seller, I would not agree to that because I want
Yeah.
it exposed to everybody in the world. But at the same time, from a buyer's perspective, how do you get to be the lucky one that gets picked to see that house?
Mhm.
And how do you
Mhm.
know that the agent that's representing that pocket listing, which is what we call them, is actually
Mhm.
going to give you all the details? It's not all of the information that should be available to us is not necessarily available because it's being kept such a secret. So I
Yeah.
just don't see that it's beneficial to a consumer to
Yeah.
to pursue something like that. And I get asked all the time by buyers, "Do you have access to off-market listings?" No, I don't,
Right.
because I don't one
Yeah.
have listings. That's why you're talking to me, because I don't do listings. And
Right, right.
two, I don't trust them. I
Yeah.
don't trust them. There just is an uneasy, like you said, there's a fair housing situation that I could
Yeah.
see that really raise its ugly head because the laws of real estate, and I use the term laws loosely, but properties that are on the market are to be made available to the masses. Period.
Everybody.
End of
Mhm.
conversation. That's how you have a fair real estate market is
Mhm.
every marketable property is made available to everybody in all the different ways it can be. The
Unless
IDX.
it's for sale by owner.
Well, yeah, and even
Yeah.
those can be put on Zillow,
Right. Right.
realtor.com. Those can
True.
be out there as well.
If you're telling somebody, "Okay, you're the right buyer for this property," what is that criteria? Does
Right.
that mean that that buyer is not gonna be able to have a home inspection? I mean, think about it. Are you
Yep.
telling that buyer, "This off-market property is gonna be available, but you can't have an appraisal contingency," meaning that you
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to get out if the price you're paying is under the list price.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
no, you're right.
and
But
then
does
and
it, the
then
value doesn't come back?
Right, and then
Yeah.
if the home inspection, if you if you come back with problems with the home inspection, is that seller gonna negotiate with you? Because
Mhm.
they're gonna probably say, "I wanna go with somebody who's gonna waive that home inspection." I mean, it gets
Exactly.
into some really weird areas. Then the biggest thing is the liability issue for the seller and the listing brokerage, because that is where I would really be nervous if I were a
Mhm.
listing brokerage.
Yeah.
Am I exposing myself to a lawsuit? Let's say you tell somebody, the only way this, seller's gonna take your offer is if you go 50K over the list price
Exactly.
of your inspection. And then you find out when your appraisal comes back that it was actually appraised at under that list price.
Exactly.
I mean, so many
Exactly.
weird
Mhm.
things could come up with that.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so just a heads up for consumers, the pocket listing or the off-market listing, it sounds like a sweet deal, but, no.
I think that
It's
falls into the it if it sounds too good to be true, it is. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's where you really have to be thoughtful about the thing that you have to understand as a consumer, and we as EBAs get it. This is one of the biggest purchases you're ever going to make in your life. And in our business, and one of the things I say to my client, I don't care if you're spending $50,000 or $5 million.
Mhm,
This is important to me. As a
mhm.
consumer in the home buying process, in my opinion, it is paramount to have a well educated, very experienced realtor that is representing your interest and your interest alone. Because, as you said, home inspections, home appraisals, there are so many things that can come up during the home buying process that if you don't have the right sort of guidance and the right sort of advocate on your side, you can really find yourself in a world of hurt. And why? Why
Yeah,
would you put yourself in that position?
yeah,
Find
yeah,
somebody, interview somebody that you feel like you can trust, that truly has your interest at heart, and that you're going to be giving this person a tremendous amount of responsibility on your behalf. You want to
mm,
be sure they know what they're doing.
yeah.
There's a
Right.
we're I've been in the business for almost 35 years, which means I'm really old and I'm not technologically savvy. There are several things my clients, I mean, spreadsheets, I hate them, but
Yeah,
I know what I'm doing when it comes to real estate. So
yeah,
find yourself someone that you feel very comfortable. Make sure they know what they're doing with regard to selling real estate
yeah.
and talking through it. And also find someone that has a good rapport and a good ability to communicate with the agent that's on the other side of the transaction.
Mhm.
You don't ever go into a real estate, at least in my opinion, it is a mistake to go into a real estate transaction thinking the person on the other side is your adversary. They're
Oh, yeah,
not. They're not. But I've seen some of the other agents that do treat this as if we're going to some kind of war or
yeah,
battle. And I'm like, what are we fighting for? We're
yeah,
trying to get the best for our client. You're trying to get the best for your client. At the end of the day,
right.
we both are successful and everybody's happy.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the goal. And that should be the end goal in the real estate transaction is you walk away with everybody feeling like they got exactly what they wanted. Nobody got harmed in the transaction. Everybody
right.
got what they were looking for. Just, I want everybody to go out, find an agent that they love, that they trust, that they feel good about, and find the home that will bring them joy and that they can make their own and love this real estate transaction. Real estate's one of the best investments you can make for your lifetime.
Mhm.
Just make sure you make it with somebody who's got your back.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
the easy way to go.
Great, great way to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Andy DeFelice is the owner and broker of Exclusive Buyers Realty in Savannah, Georgia. She's been in the business for a long time, 35 years, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
35 years. Andy, thank you so much for joining me on
My
this.
pleasure. Thank you for having me, Victoria. Enjoy the rest of your day.